Let's begin with a concept that wasn't invented in democracy at all, but in the fading years of the Soviet Union. Anthropologist Alexei Yurchak watched the USSR enter a strange final stage. Everyone, officials, media, ordinary people, knew the system was hollow, that the story the state told about itself no longer matched reality. And yet, everyone continued behaving as if the story was still true. It was easier to act out of fiction than to confront the chaos of truth. Yurchak called this condition hypernormalization, a society performing a version of itself long after that version has stopped being real. And when the collapse finally came, it felt sudden. Not because the system had been strong, but because the performance had been so convincing. The idea of a nation drifting into a comfortable narrative while ignoring rising contradictions becomes a startling, useful lens for understanding India's transformation over the last decade or so. For decades, India anchored its identity in pluralism, always boasting about being a land of many languages, many religions, many cultures. It was messy, contradictory, often uneven, but the idea of a secular republic was a shared reference point. Slowly, however, a different story began to eclipse that old self-image. It portrayed India not as a diverse democracy, but as a wounded Hindu civilization rediscovering its voice. It framed the nation's present not through policy or governance, but through a sweeping civilizational struggle. And because this story was emotionally sharper and far simpler than the messy reality it replaced, it spread quickly. Once that story found its audience, the country didn't merely listen to it, it began living inside it. The shift brought a striking psychological effect. Although Hindus form a clear demographic majority, the new narrative began casting them as endangered, under attack, or concerned by individual threats. This recasting of a majority into a vulnerable minority is powerful. It heightens vigilance, it creates a sense of permanent alertness, it pushes people to rally behind strong leadership perceived as protective. And in that heightened emotional environment, fears grow louder than facts. A rumor feels like evidence, a disagreement feels like a betrayal, a minority groups feel larger than it is. This is exactly the terrain where hypernormalization thrives, where emotional truth begins to override empirical truth. Scholars like Christoph Jefferlot argue that this transformation hasn't happened by accident. It comes from a long-term project by the RSS and BJP to reshape the very instinct of the nation. This isn't enforced through explicit commands. It happens subtly, through education, cultural messaging, media, social networks, and constant repetition. History is retold with new emphasis. Public speeches lean on civilizational metaphors, social media floods timelines with tales of pride and grievance, TV debates reduce every issue to conflict between loyalty and danger. Over time, these messages settle into muscle memory. People shift without realizing they're shifting. Their responses, fears, and assumptions are quietly recalibrated. And while this psychological reshaping unfolds, the media ecosystem functions like an amplifier. Instead of presenting competing realities, many outlets project one overarching storyline. The nation is under threat, the leader is its shield, and vigilance is patriotic duty. Minor incidents are inflated, criticism becomes hostility, and protests are cast as existential challenges. Slowly, the boundary between news and narrative blurs. Viewers aren't simply being informed, they are being immersed. They begin inhabiting a reality curated by screens, not shaped by their daily lives. Institutions, meanwhile, don't collapse dramatically. They simply lean. Universities avoid uncomfortable topics, courts emphasize cultural sentiment, bureaucrats choose caution over dissent, artists hesitate before expressing themselves freely. No single moment marks the shift. It's gradual, quiet tilting of the system towards the dominant narrative. And once institutions tilt for long enough, the new angle feels natural. All of this creates an atmosphere where disagreement becomes invisible. In private, people may still debate, doubt, or worry, but in public, the appearance of consensus grows more solid each year. Hypernormalization doesn't need real unanimity. It thrives on illusion of it. And when a nation behaves as if everyone shares an unwavering belief, that belief becomes self-reinforcing. This brings us back to the Soviet origin of the term. Hypernormalization didn't merely distort reality in the USSR, it concealed fractures. It hid tensions until they became too deep to manage. When the shattering finally came, it came all at once, catching even those inside the system by surprise. A country that looked strong from the outside collapsed because its internal contradictions had been ignored rather than confronted. A large, diverse nation like India faces a similar structural risk. Not the same ideology, not the same system, but the same fragility that comes from treating a complex society as if it can be molded into a simple narrative. When a nation suppresses complexity, when it replaces debate with performance, when institutions tilt instead of balancing, when emotional truth overshadows lived truth, cracks begin to form beneath the surface. India is not destined for collapse, but hypernormalization warns that stability built on performance rather than reality is inherently brittle. The breaking point is not always visible until it arrives, and countries that grow accustomed on living inside simplified stories often discover, too late, that stories cannot hold the weight of a nation forever. Thank you for watching. Allah Hafiz.